Okay, so I wanted to talk about the knowledge of having Asperger Syndrome and the pros and cons of having that knowledge. And of course, that knowledge comes from getting a diagnosis. A lot of people have asked me, is it worth it? Should I get a diagnosis? What are some of the benefits to knowing that I have Asperger Syndrome? Can it help me in a certain way, or is it really just a waste of time? I'd say there are definitely pros and cons about having that knowledge. I'll go over the pros first. I think it's really beneficial to have a knowledge of whether or not you're on the autism spectrum. If you're really young, like still in early education, because there are a lot of programs available to help kids who are on the spectrum in elementary, middle school, and high school. I didn't go through any of these because, of course, I had no idea that I was on the autism spectrum, so I just had the normal education like any other normal kid would. But looking back, I think it could have been beneficial to me to have some of these programs utilized. I think it would have been really advantageous. I did make it through just with a normal education, but I probably worried myself into oblivion. It was a very stressful time for me, and I think I would have saved myself a lot of trouble and a lot of stomach pain had I taken advantage of those programs. If I had known that I had Asperger Syndrome, maybe there could have been some kind of change in environment, a way to make me less stressed, less nervous, and able to focus on academics without having any of the stressors that I normally had. But obviously back then it was just, I was worried and I didn't know why. I had no idea it was having anything to do with Asperger Syndrome. I thought, I was worried because the schoolwork was hard, or that, a certain class was difficult and that caused me stress. But looking back on it, I really don't think it was all that hard. I think I was just in the wrong environment and it was not really conducive to my learning like it could have been. So definitely, if you are very young watching this, or if you have a kid who you think might be on the spectrum, get them tested, I would say, if they're really young, because I think in most places they have a lot of programs available to help kids, and I think it would have been good for me. But definitely take advantage of that. And similar to that is the knowledge of having Asperger Syndrome can really help you in career choices. This is another thing that I really screwed the pooch on, because I went into a field that I don't really think is suited for Aspies. I did manage to find myself a little niche for a while, but it was still just not really a good career choice, I don't think. In retrospect, it didn't pay enough, and it was, the job I had for a while I considered just a job, but not a career. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm probably going to have to go back to school. I've got a whole lot of student loan debt, so I'm going to have to find some job that I can do as an Aspie to pay off that debt, and then go back to school and aim for a career choice that is better suited to me as an Aspie. But, my point is, don't make the mistake that I did and wind up on some road to nowhere, so to speak, that you're not going to be comfortable doing in the long term. But, again, if you're young, in high school or something, there are a lot of resources online that suggest good careers for Aspies, depending on the type of Aspie that you are. Lots of different options, and I have one in mind, but it's probably going to take me a while, because like I said, I have to go back and pay off all my debts and then get new debts so I can go back to college. But yeah, definitely career choices, it's a big advantage to know beforehand whether you're on the spectrum or not, because it can definitely help. And a final pro, I think, of having the knowledge is that it explains a lot of things you might have been wondering about yourself. Odd, quirky habits that you may have had growing up. I certainly had a lot of them, but the knowledge of having Asperger Syndrome explained a lot of it. So I guess in a sense it made me feel less quirky, like it was, not something that just I did, because that's what I thought for the longest time. I thought it was just something that I kind of did that no one else did, and I kind of had to keep it a secret because, my odd mannerisms and things, I didn't think anyone else on this planet did it except for me. But come to find out, and I'm speaking mainly of stimming and things like that, are common Aspie behaviors, so that kind of helped me and, made me feel a little more comfortable with myself with regards to, those traits. But there are also, in my opinion, some cons. One con is, while there are a lot of programs to help younger kids, there really isn't a lot out there to help grown adult Aspies. There are not a whole lot of books about living as an adult with Asperger Syndrome. Most of them are centered around how to raise a child on the autism spectrum and, tips for children on the autism spectrum, but not really a lot of focus on adults. Especially where I live, there are no programs or support groups or any kind of help really for adults with Asperger Syndrome. So in that case, it's really kind of pointless to have a diagnosis, because you can't really do anything with it as far as getting any kind of help or joining any kind of support group, at least not here in the physical world. Obviously there are online communities, but nothing locally. Maybe if you're in a really large city there is, but certainly not where I live. Another thing that I would say is a con is that it can really be discouraging sometimes, and this is mainly speaking from my own personal experience. Ever since I got the knowledge, I've noticed that I've just tried a lot less to be normal. It was almost like, I know who I am, and I'm not going to change anything about who I am. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm a person who gets depressed a whole lot, and, living in isolation is not really good for anyone's mental health, regardless of whether you're neurotypical or Aspie. I think humans are wired for social interaction. And the funny thing was, I used to have friends. didn't have a whole lot of friends, but I used to have some back before I was diagnosed, especially through high school and college and everything. Now granted, a lot of them, well, all of them pretty much went away, but for a while there I did have some friends, and I kind of think that the simple fact that I didn't know I was an Aspie kind of made me not necessarily consciously try to be normal, but I didn't have the mindset of, okay, this is how I am, therefore this is how I'm supposed to be. It was like I was just sort of blending in, not even trying to blend in, but just kind of blending in, because I had been raised and, programmed and conditioned to do certain things, even if it wasn't comfortable for me to do certain things. And I still think that in the end, the truth of who I am kind of won over, because like I said, I don't really have any friends anymore, and it's I think there were a lot of reasons why they went away, but I have a feeling that a lot of it was due to things they didn't like about me, or maybe things I said or things I did that upset them, or just things they didn't understand. Obviously it wasn't intentional, but I had no idea that I was offending anyone, and they certainly didn't explain to me that it was offending them. And keep in mind, a lot of this is speculation. Like I said, with all the different friends that I had over the years, it was a different case as to why they went away. But I think a lot of it, especially with past relationships, were just things about me that pissed them off, or that they didn't understand, and it exasperated me because I didn't know why I was repelling them. So, it is kind of a mixed bag as to whether the knowledge is beneficial or not, because before I had that knowledge, I at least made some attempts to try to fit in without really knowing who I was. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is really kind of subjective, because it's kind of like the actor Aspies. Yes, it's good that they're able to blend in and make friends and probably be more happy, but it's not who they really are. So it's just kind of however you look at it, whether it's a pro or a con or not. But I'm always a person who thinks that people should just be who they are, but that's probably why I don't have any friends. But the final con, I think, is that I don't really like the label of Asperger Syndrome, because a lot of people make assumptions and a lot of stereotypes happen, and I don't like being labeled or pigeonholed as anything. And a lot of people, when they get that diagnosis, they will tend to I think sort of pigeonhole themselves, or just immediately start labeling themselves as something. And it's probably because, they've been stamped with the label of autism. And, like I said, the society has a lot of stereotypes and a lot of misinformation about people with autism. And so much so that I think the people who have it may start to label themselves accordingly, sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, in that sense, I think it's kind of a con, because I don't like the labels in and of themselves, and how it can lead to how people interpret themselves and how others interpret them based on some label without really getting to know the person. So yeah, that's so like I said, I think overall, if you're young and there are programs available that you know of, I think it would be a good idea to get a diagnosis. But if you're older, and you've gone through college and everything, and if you're settled on a career or something, then I don't really think there's much of a need to get a diagnosis. But then again, it's kind of depends on the individual, so it's really up to you. But keep in mind that there are pros and there are cons. But like I said, it's just up to the individual.